of the things that keeps coming up, and we discussed it last time briefly, is that harmful effects of plants should be included when discussing the benefits, and they are so often left out. People will always talk about the wonderful benefits of theobromine in chocolate and all the great benefits you get from, spinach, and they don't ever talk about the other side, which of course are the oxalates. And then I have a whole list of other anti-nutrients that are in certain, nuts, seeds, and plants that they only discuss what's helpful and beneficial, like in tannins. There's a lot of really great benefits to tannins, but they never talk about that it's an enzyme inhibitor and it can prevent the digestion of certain, nutrients in the gastrointestinal tract. They only talk about the good things. So it always comes up. I'll have a discussion with someone on Facebook or Twitter, and they almost want to start an argument about, well, it's only a problem for if you're sensitive, they'll say.
Yeah,
if you're
that's
sensitive
the terminology,
to oxalates.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. And I say, you're right. And when you find out you're sensitive, then you come onto my bandwagon and you start to become a voice and talk to people, because sensitivities can land you in the hospital if they're bad enough. And I know that you were in for one reason. I was also, because of an oxalate issue. So if we
can we tackle that word sensitivity?
Okay.
Because this is one of my pet peeves. So people use the word sensitivity as if you're only going to have a problem with something under certain, let's say, special conditions. Okay. No one would say to you, oh, I have no problem eating food that have arsenic in it. I don't have a sensitivity. And I'm deliberately using the example of arsenic because arsenic is something that can turn up in our foods. So if you're eating a lot of rice, for instance, a lot of the farms which used to grow cotton have been converted to rice because you have a close enough growing environment that rice actually does quite well there. And because we use things like arsenic to kill off cotton weevils, some of this rice can have arsenic in it. Nobody in their right mind would say, oh, I'm fine eating rice, I'm not sensitive to arsenic. In fact, it's a discussion that I see in different nutrition circles, and I have people ask me about it fairly regularly, especially if they've gone gluten-free and they want to stay away from gluten-based grains. Rice becomes one of the big alternatives. And so I would argue, actually, that in many cases, we're not talking about sensitivities. We are talking about the poison is in the dose. So in the same way that I would say to someone, if you're eating rice occasionally, you might want to soak it and throw off the soaking water, make sure it's well rinsed, blah, blah, blah. And then don't stress too much about trace amounts of arsenic. Is it good for you? No, not saying that. But in small amounts, your body will probably be able to do what it needs to do to get rid of it. The more unwell you are, then I would say be more careful, because maybe the systems in your body that are going to get rid of these kinds of toxins may not be working at full bandwidth, or you might have other kinds of compromise. And so you have to think about that a bit more. That's different than a sensitivity. I'm never going to say you just have a sensitivity to arsenic. Now, I'm going to argue that oxalate is that kind of thing. In sufficient dose, oxalate is a lethal poison, not just your regular garden variety thing. It is more like arsenic. Small amounts, arsenic's not going to kill you. Big amounts, it sure as heck will. And that's the same deal with oxalate. So when people say to me, oh, I'm not sensitive to oxalate, it's like, it's not a sensitivity. Yes. And, could you have a different threshold at where it becomes apparent? Sure. Because some people can die with arsenic at a relatively low level compared to another person who might be able to tolerate a much higher level. That doesn't mean there's a sensitivity there. That means they couldn't get rid of it as efficiently. Maybe they had other kinds of vulnerabilities in their system. Maybe they had genetics that set them up to be more vulnerable to the kinds of things that arsenic does, but we would never argue that it's not a poison. Right. So I'm going to say I would always argue that oxalate is on that kind of level. Now, can your body get rid of it? Yes, it can. Unlike arsenic, oxalate is something that our bodies can produce a certain amount of as a metabolic end product. And that's a normal thing. Every human being walking the face of the planet, as far as we know, produces a certain amount of oxalate as an end product of metabolism.